So, what inspired you to get into acting?
What matters is the story and how you craft it.
You've answered a lot of the questions already with that one answer, so that's fine.
A bit of tenacity, a smidgen of ignorance, just not accepting the limitations of your own talent and experience and the resources that you got.
Why'd you bring us here?
You won't let them hurt me.
No one's gonna hurt you.
Your brother was in prison, right?
Mine, yeah, young offenders.
And what are you afraid of?
Guilt was just the fear of getting caught.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on your favourite podcasting platform. Thank you.
So Lilo follows a young man called Parnell, who witnesses a knife crime in the southeast of England, and he escapes to France, where his sister lives. He escapes with his mother, and they hide out at his sister's at a kind of a. She's living kind of a bohemian lifestyle with a boyfriend and her boyfriend's father, who turns out to be a kind of self-appointed shaman, and he takes Parnell under his wing. Whilst Parnell is kind of working out his own issues and the strange family ties sort of play out, in the meantime, the kind of repercussions of this violent act at the beginning of the film are slowly making their way to where our family are.
What was the most challenging aspect of shooting this film, and did the final version come close to your original vision?
The method of the way I had to shoot it meant that my original vision always had to become quite fluid. So originally we were going to make the film for 150,000, and at some point, after banging my head against the wall trying to get finance for that and get that up and running, decided to make it for 10,000. I was going to make it. The plan was to make it 10,000 over 10 days. It turned out that it was 15,000 and change, and that was shot over 13 days. So you have this original vision that you have very solidly in your mind, but as soon as you sort of commit to this method of shooting, your vision has to become malleable, So I think story-wise, narrative, like the structure, the themes are all intact and they're all there. But visually, to be honest, another thing that happened was because you storyboard it, and we were reliant on natural lighting and last minute changes to locations, and so to be honest, there's some things in there that aren't quite to the level of my original vision, and then there's other things that have surpassed it because they just weren't planned. And so I think giving yourself that freedom and not being so rigid and structured to a sort of preconceived idea of what it's going to be, you allow yourself to discover things and for happy accidents to happen, and that that's kind of, I know, especially for the actors, and if you're really creative and artistic, if you want to follow that path of being an artist, I think for me that's where it is. When you find things and discover things that weren't there to begin with.
How on earth did you manage to make this with the budget of just 15,000?
It
seems staggering to me. You've the production values, the cinematic quality that's consistent throughout the film. How did you manage it?
I still don't know, to be honest. I think the tenacity, a bit of tenacity, a smidgen of ignorance, just not accepting the limitations of your own talent and experience and the resources that you got, and just doing it, like just literally just throwing caution to the wind. I mean, I've to be honest, I've shot a lot of kind of corporate videos and even documentaries where I've been the only person on set, and when you get there, you are you're at the mercy of whatever you're given. Sometimes you turn up at somebody's house to do an interview. You have to use whatever you've got there. So I kind of already had experience just coping with whatever you're given, and I think it's a humbling sort of state to put yourself in, that this is what you've got, and to be honest, it's nothing new. Like, I kind of had Last Frontiers, sort of the Dogma 95 movement in the back of my mind, where they've kind of created a set of rules. One of I can't remember the exact rules, but there's certain rules, like you can't have a gun, you can't shoot with actual lighting. It's got to be all available lighting. The actors have to wear their own clothes. All of these sort of list of ideas. And what the reason why they came up, or the sort of philosophy behind that, was that if you give yourself that rigid approach, the dogma, then it frees you from the other constraints, which are budget and time. And so we like the story hardly changed. I did make changes to the script, obviously, but in essence the main change was the logistics. So we went from, say, a 25-person crew and maybe 10 cast members on set at any given time, so you've got like 35 people on set. This is when we were doing the schedule, to having me, a sound guy, and a production manager / runner, and that was it. And then we would never have more than 5 cast members on set at any given time. We kind of planned the costume and wardrobe beforehand, and I made sure that everybody had what they needed. And then the actors were fine with sort of making themselves up and dressing themselves, which is quite common in theatre and things like that. So I think people can get attached to the comforts that you have on larger budgets, which have their merits. And, God willing, well, whoever willing, one day I'll have that luxury on a feature film. I've had that luxury before on shorts, but I think, for now, if I want to make features, this is how I have to do it, and I'm willing to do it that way.
Did you draw on any personal experiences when you wrote this?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I haven't had.
The reason I ask that is because for me, sorry to interrupt you, it just comes across so authentically. And I'm not suggesting you're in gangs or anything like that, but I just wondered if you had connections or third-party stories of etc. of the themes and the storylines.
I think everything that I've done so far, because I'm starting from a spot where I'm outside of the industry, I always start really pragmatically, which is that I don't have time to do very in-depth research. So I think most of what I've done so far is, it starts from a place of, I know these people, I know these type of characters. The situation that they get into might be extreme, and you research that to sort of make sure that what's happening could happen in the real world. But I'm from the northeast of England, quite working class background, and you can't, and even when I came down to London, hanging out with my dad and stuff, and you come into contact with people who live on the edge of violence, or they're dealing with, whether it's dealing with drug abuse or sort of casual violence. I mean, originally it was set up north, and when I was a kid, the type of criminality was very different to what I experienced in London. London seemed very much more organised and, focused. And up north, people had jobs, lived their lives, went to the pub, but also had their fingers in criminality. And so there was no real, you weren't a gangster, or you weren't a criminal, you were just somebody that was a bit dodgy. You might come in with you'd be in the pub and somebody come in with a bag full of clothes or something, and you never thought anything of it. And I think all of that sort of informed the earlier versions of the script. And then because I had to set it in the South, because of access to actors, it kind of took on a different tone with the focusing on the knife crime, and maybe gang culture to a certain extent, or at least the parameters of it, you know. But yeah, I think everything you write has to come at some point from something you know, unless you have, again, the time to really do some in-depth research, which I don't really at the moment, you know. Yeah. One day though.
Did you choose the French Riviera to draw a clear contrast and escape from sort of the London gangland crime scene?
So that was a complete happy accident. Originally, the film was, that part of the film was set in a seaside resort that was closed for the winter in Britain. So we'd originally looked at Norfolk and Norwich. I think there was a seaside resort. We looked further down south, a place like Dungeness, and it was always trying to create a dichotomy and a contrast between the urban and the more rural. But then I was looking for this location, and I had a very small amount of money to spend on the location. But then one of the potential investors turned around and said they knew of a place in the French Riviera that we could use. And I sort of scratched my head and thought, well, that sounds great. That would be a free accommodation, but then we've got to get everybody out there, you know, which is a whole other thing. And then feed them when they're out there, and you know, and the aim was to always have a location away from London or away from where people lived, so that we were all on location, and then that would create some sort of, you know, bond and camaraderie, and we could maybe shoot an hour later than normal without anybody, you know, it taking a toll on anybody. But I did the maths, and it worked out fine, and it worked out a bit cheaper, and then because of the natural difference that you've obviously noticed, and a lot of people have, it really helped. It really aided. And then it snowed as well, you know, while we were in London. So, you know, and at first I was worried because, yeah, exactly. And well, the first day it snowed, and I shot around it because I didn't want, you know, to be shooting the next day and it not have any snow. So I was completely avoiding the snow for the first day. And then it was about halfway through the second day where I was like, right, now I can make this a character, and shot quite a lot. But then we got out to the French Riviera, and it was so much sunnier than it should be, and so much more. And I started worrying that the difference might be too much. But it's one thing that a lot of people since have complimented and said that it really helps.
How long did it take to write it?
That's a strange one. I think I definitely started writing it maybe 6 years ago, I would say. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that I'll have a germ of an idea, I'll develop that into a story, and then I kind of go the opposite way to sort of the way you told, which is I just write reams of dialogue. I can go for a walk and come back with at least 10 pages of dialogue, and it's very easy for me to write dialogue. I find it very hard to write direction. I have to concentrate and think about that. So I'll get away with writing a lot of dialogue, and so the germ of the idea of Lilo was always in the back, but I was also developing different things. And then a friend of mine came back from a trip in Mexico, and they like, I want to be a producer. And I said, well, I've got this kind of script. I'll go and work on it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I'll polish it, and then I'll have it. And then from that period on, and they left the production, and I went through another couple of producers, and then went back and shot some short films, because I realised I was trying to make a feature before I really had any sort of short film experience. I'd made short films in the past, but a long time ago. And so I went back and made short films. So things just go back and forth, you know. But I think, so it's very hard to sort of pinpoint how long in man hours it would have took to write. But sometimes that's better, because then it's marinating, and some of the ideas, the more poetic character arcs are really fully formed, rather than you sitting down in front of a computer trying to work it out according to the script writers, you know, whatever scriptwriter guru book you've got at the time, you know. How
did you manage to get the most out of the relatively inexperienced cast members such as Elena Sella and Aaron Thomas Ward? Did that sort of happen naturally? Did they just put in two brilliant performances, or did you have to kind of coach them through it? How did it kind of,
I think a mix. I definitely wouldn't say I coached anybody through it. I think I formed a good relationship with them both beforehand, where there was a level of trust and safety. I would hope so anyway, you know. I think Aaron is quite an experienced actor for somebody his age. He is really sort of keen and asks a lot of questions and is very attentive. I'd worked with him on a short beforehand where he was the lead, and I was umming and ahhing whether to use him for Lilo because he might have been a bit older than I was imagining. And then as soon as it sort of thought, oh, I've got a relationship with him, he's a good actor, and started talking to him on the phone, I was like, oh yeah, he gets it. And he did a lot of work, a lot of homework. He felt like that he knew that character, and he knew of those characters in his, in his sort of neighborhood. Alina was basically, I had another actress in mind who pulled out quite close to the shoot, and there was 2 actresses I was looking at, Alina being one of them, and we did an audition, and she was just so emotional, and it was really kind of intense, but I could tell there was a rawness there, and maybe a lack of experience. But I felt like that was a good chance to take, and she proved right as well, and that, and we formed a good relationship, and when I see them both, it's nice. It's like seeing family, and I think I think they're both going to be great. I think Aaron's on his way already. Alina's getting little bits and parts here, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to see their career develop. I think that's the best thing about it. Like whatever happens with the film, forming relationships with other artists and seeing their careers flourish, or or them finding fulfillment in different parts of their life is worth all of it, really. I think that's it's more about the experience than the end product.
What advice would you give to budding writers?
I don't actually consider myself a writer. That's the funny thing. I mean, I think it's a kind of an old adage, or it's advice that I've heard quite a lot, which is just write anything. If you want to write an instruction manual to using your phone, write that. If you keep writing and don't be intimidated by, especially with film, don't be intimidated. If obviously, because I wanted to make my own film, I knew I had to put restrictions on myself, which is location, size of the cast. But if you're serious about writing a script, just write whatever if it's a space opera set across 7 seasons, just write it, just get it down, just do that, and you'll make your own mistakes. Don't rely on books too much. The writing guru books, they're good. They're like Google Maps. If you're going in the woods, it's good to sort of every now and again just check that you're on the right path, but it's better to explore and find your own path and make your own mistakes. But yeah, I'm not really I'm not really cool for giving advice, because obviously I'm still at the very, very early stages of my own sort of discovery.
What advice would you give to budding directors?
Same, just direct, get anything. I mean, I think film, moving image, is the most accessible art form. So if you want to write a book, good luck. You really need to know literature. You really need to know language. You need to understand prose and phrase and grammar, and you need to be a poet, really. I think anyway, for a good book writer. If you want to be a painter or an artist, you need to spend years and years doing this. I'm not saying that you don't need experience to be a filmmaker, but every day we are interacting with visuals, whether it be on our phone, whether we're watching an advert, whether we're watching a music video. I don't know anybody that doesn't have that in their life. I know people that don't listen to music. I know people that never pick up a book. But nearly everybody interacts, whether they want to or not, with the visual form. And I think go out there and shoot, and don't pay too much attention to the rules and the grammar until I think that's important. But I think just go out there and shoot stuff and find your own grammar and find your own rules and just experiment as much as possible. Because at one point, as soon as you start taking it seriously, or you start getting paid, or you are lucky enough to get a funding or whatever, all of that experimentation and playing will be sucked out of you to create, a pre-made. And so if you're already experimental and you've already gone that distance, then hopefully when you're having all of that sucked out of you, it won't be sucked out too much that you end up being a hack. You'd be somewhere in between where you can marry the poetry with the rigidness and the commercial, and you can marry the sort of the purposefulness with naturalism, and I think it's like playing. But I think before you start learning the film school rules, go out and play as much as possible and be creative.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on your favourite podcasting platform. Thank you.